The forbidden choice. The grand hall of the Galactic Dominion was silent. The ceiling stretched high above, covered in strange glowing symbols that shimmered like stars. The walls, tall and dark, seemed to press in on the gathered crowd. Hundreds of alien leaders, warriors, and nobles stood together, their eyes fixed on the center of the hall. In the middle, the alien queen sat on her throne. Her skin was a deep shade of blue, almost black, and her silver eyes shone coldly. A sharp crown rested on her head, made of bone from the strongest creatures in the galaxy. She was feared by all, respected by many, and doubted by none. But now, her expression was unreadable. Before her, kneeling on one knee, was Vakar, the youngest warrior from the elite Xilari race. His armor gleamed under the dim lights, his posture strong and proud. His sharp, reptilian features showed no fear, only determination. The hall waited, holding its breath. Finally, the queen spoke, her voice echoing through the hall. "The rumors are true. You've chosen the human," she said coldly. Gasps filled the room. Whispers spread like wildfire. "A human." Someone hissed. "Impossible." Another growled. "No one chooses a human," a deep voice muttered from the shadows. Vakar remained silent, his head slightly bowed, but his glowing green eyes never left the queen's face. The queen leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "Explain yourself, Vakar. Why would a warrior of the Xilari choose a fragile human as a bond partner?" Vakar finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "Because strength is not always muscle, my queen," he said. "Sometimes strength is something more, something unseen." The queen's fingers tapped lightly on the arm of her throne. She did not like surprises. She hated uncertainty. And this was something no one expected. A human. Weak, emotional, unstable. Humans were not warriors. They were seen as unpredictable creatures from a small, insignificant planet. The Galactic Dominion had kept Earth isolated for a reason. No human had ever been chosen for the warrior's bond. Until now. Two guards stepped forward, dragging a figure behind them. The figure stumbled, chains clinking loudly against the polished floor. He was a human, tall but not muscular, with messy dark hair and a scar running across his left eyebrow. His clothes were torn, and his face was bruised. Ethan Carter. His brown eyes scanned the room lazily, almost as if bored, but there was something sharp hidden behind that tired gaze. Something dangerous. The guards shoved him to his knees beside Vakar. Ethan let out a small chuckle, shaking his head. "Well, this is awkward," Ethan muttered under his breath. A loud hiss echoed from one of the council members. Silence, human. But Ethan didn't look scared. He glanced at Vakar and raised an eyebrow. "Really? Me? You sure you picked the right guy?" Vakar didn't answer. He didn't need to. The queen rose from her throne, her tall figure towering over everyone in the room. "You do not understand what you have done, Vakar," she said, her voice quiet but sharp as a blade. "You have risked our future for this." Vakar stood slowly, facing the queen without fear. "I understand perfectly," he replied. "The human is the future." The crowd erupted into chaos. Shouts filled the hall. "Madness. He will ruin us. Humans are weak. They cannot be trusted." But the queen raised her hand, and the hall fell silent once more. Her eyes locked onto Ethan, studying him like a predator watching its prey. "Human," she said softly, but there was a threat behind her words. "You will prove your worth, or you will die." Ethan smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Yeah, sounds about right," he said casually. The queen's eyes flicked back to Vakar. "If he fails, it will be on your hands." Vakar nodded, accepting the challenge. The queen turned to the council. "The human will face the Crimson Arena tomorrow." More gasps filled the room. The Crimson Arena was a death sentence for most warriors. For a human, it would be impossible. The queen's lips curled into a small, cold smile. Let us see if this human is truly worthy, or if this choice will be the end of you both. Ethan let out a slow breath, then glanced at Vakar. Crimson Arena, huh? He said with a smirk. Guess we're skipping the warm-up. Vakar didn't smile, but his eyes showed something close to amusement. You're not afraid? He asked quietly. Ethan chuckled. Oh, I'm terrified, he replied softly. But fear's the fun part. As the guards dragged Ethan away, the Queen's voice echoed through the hall one last time. Rest well, human. Tomorrow, you will face death. Ethan's quiet response lingered in the air. Death better be ready for me. The Queen's eyes narrowed. She wasn't sure if it was arrogance or something far more dangerous. And that was what scared her the most. The human problem. The grand hall was empty now, but whispers of shock still echoed through its walls. The news of Vakar's choice spread like wildfire across the Dominion. A human, a species that was never meant to stand among the galaxy's greatest warriors. Yet one had been chosen. In a cold, dimly lit chamber, Vakar stood alone, sharpening his blade with slow, deliberate strokes. His mind was calm, but his heart carried the weight of countless questions. Why him? The voice came from behind him, sharp, questioning, and filled with disbelief. It was Zira, another Xilari warrior, and one of the few who dared question Vakar directly. Vakar didn't turn, because he is not like the others. Zira scoffed. He is human. They are all the same. Weak, emotional, unpredictable. You know this. Vakar's blade stopped mid-stroke. Exactly, he replied softly. Unpredictable. Zira's expression darkened. That is not strength. That is chaos. Sometimes, Vakar whispered, chaos is exactly what you need. Far below the palace, in the dark cells beneath the arena, Ethan Carter sat on a cold stone bench, staring at the ceiling. His fingers tapped a slow rhythm on his knee, his mind replaying the events of the day. Chosen by an alien warrior? Yeah, that's new, he muttered to himself with a dry chuckle. A guard banged on the bars. Quiet, human. Ethan sighed. Sure thing, big guy. The cell door opened, and Vakar stepped inside. Ethan raised an eyebrow. So, this is where we have our heart-to-heart. Vakar ignored the sarcasm. The Crimson Arena is not a game. You could die. Ethan smirked. Oh, I'm counting on it. Vakar's eyes narrowed. You think this is funny? Ethan's grin faded. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and locked eyes with Vakar. His tone shifted, calm, serious, almost cold. No, but you do, he said softly. You all think humans are jokes. Weak, fragile, easy to break. He leaned back and chuckled, but there was no humor in it. I wonder how many of your warriors would survive a day on Earth. Vakar said nothing. He had seen glimpses of Earth's history. Wars, chaos, pain. Humans had survived it all. You chose me, Ethan continued. And now you're wondering if you made a mistake. Vakar remained silent. Ethan's smile returned. Good. The next day, the Crimson Arena was filled with roaring crowds. The arena was massive, with jagged rocks, shifting floors, and deadly traps waiting to be triggered. 3 monstrous Xilari beasts were released into the arena, each one bigger than Ethan, faster than him, stronger than him. Ethan stood in the center, chains removed but no weapon in sight. From the royal balcony, the queen watched, her expression unreadable. Vakar stood beside her, tense but focused. The first beast lunged. Ethan barely dodged, rolling to the side. The crowd laughed. Pathetic, someone muttered. The second beast charged. Ethan moved again, but not fast enough. Claws sliced across his shoulder, and blood trickled down his arm. The crowd cheered. The third beast stalked him from behind, ready to pounce. Ethan didn't move. The beast lunged. At the last moment, Ethan ducked, grabbed a loose piece of metal from the ground, and jammed it into the beast's leg. The creature roared in pain, stumbling back. The crowd's laughter faded. Ethan stood, blood dripping from his arm, but his eyes sharp and focused. He wasn't trying to win with strength. He was thinking, planning. The second beast attacked again. Ethan didn't try to overpower it. He sidestepped, using the beast's own momentum to send it crashing into a wall. The first beast growled, circling him. Ethan simply stared at it. And then he spoke, softly, calmly. "Stop." The beast froze. The crowd gasped. The queen's eyes narrowed. Vakar leaned forward, confused. Ethan took a slow step forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "You don't want to fight me," he said. "You're afraid." The beast growled but didn't attack. "Because you know what I'll do," Ethan whispered. The beast backed away. The arena fell silent. Ethan turned, looking directly at the queen. His voice, though soft, echoed through the arena. "Still think humans are weak?" The queen's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes shifted. Fear. No, something worse. Recognition. Vakar's voice echoed in her mind, "Because he is not like the others." She understood now, and it terrified her. The arena of no return. The Crimson Arena was never meant for humans. It was a place of blood, built to test the galaxy's fiercest warriors. Every stone in its jagged walls had soaked in the cries of the defeated. Every grain of sand had tasted blood. The crowd, made up of thousands of species from across the galaxy, lived for the brutality. They didn't want skill. They wanted survival. Raw, ruthless survival. And now, they wanted to see a human fail. Ethan Carter stood in the center, his body tense, his mind sharp. Blood dripped from the wound on his shoulder, but he barely noticed it. Pain was nothing new to him. Pain was an old friend. The three auxiliary beasts circled him, each one hungry for the kill. Massive with armored scales, razor-sharp claws, and teeth that could crush bone, they were bred for one purpose: to destroy. The queen watched from her throne, her silver eyes cold and calculating. She had seen countless warriors fall in this arena, and now she waited to see if the human would meet the same fate. Vakar stood beside her, silent. His sharp, reptilian features gave nothing away, but inside, doubt gnawed at him. Had he made a mistake? Was Ethan really what he believed him to be? The crowd roared as the largest beast lunged at Ethan, claws slicing through the air. Ethan dropped to the ground, rolling just out of reach, but the beast was fast. Too fast. It swung its massive tail, hitting Ethan square in the chest and sending him flying across the arena. The crowd cheered, already smelling blood. Ethan coughed, struggling to stand. His vision blurred for a moment, but he forced himself to focus. Giving up wasn't an option. Not now. Not ever. "Get up," he whispered to himself. One more time. The second beast charged, and Ethan barely managed to dive out of the way. His body screamed in protest, but his mind stayed clear. Every moment, every movement, he analyzed, calculated. They were strong. Too strong. Fighting them head-on was suicide. But Ethan didn't plan to fight fair. From the balcony, Vakar watched closely. Something about the humans' movements caught his attention. Ethan wasn't trying to overpower the beasts. He was studying them, waiting. "What is he doing?" Zira, standing nearby, whispered in confusion. Vakar's eyes narrowed. "He's thinking." The third beast roared, charging at Ethan with terrifying speed. Ethan ran, but not away. He ran toward the beast. The crowd gasped, expecting him to be torn apart. At the last moment, Ethan dropped to the ground, sliding under the beast's legs. With quick precision, he grabbed a sharp piece of broken metal from the arena floor and sliced through the soft flesh behind the beast's knee. The creature stumbled, roaring in pain. The crowd went silent for a moment. This wasn't strength. This was something else. Ethan stood, breathing heavily. He knew they were watching, judging, waiting for him to break. But Ethan Carter had already broken a long time ago. All that was left now was someone who knew how to survive. The Queen's eyes narrowed as she watched Ethan. There was something in his movements, something familiar yet unsettling. She leaned toward Vakar. "This human. He fights like someone who has nothing to lose," she whispered. Vakar nodded slowly. "Because he doesn't." The Queen's gaze hardened. She knew what that meant. A warrior with nothing to lose was more dangerous than any beast in the arena. The largest beast roared in frustration, charging at Ethan with blinding speed. Ethan didn't move. He stood still, his eyes locked on the beast's. The crowd held its breath. The beast lunged, claws outstretched. "Stop," Ethan whispered. And the beast did. It froze mid-attack, its eyes locked with Ethan's. For a moment, the arena was silent, filled only with the sound of shallow breathing. The crowd erupted in shock. "How?" someone whispered. Vakar's eyes widened. He had seen many things in battle, but this was something else. The Queen's grip tightened on the armrest of her throne. She recognized it now. The look in Ethan's eyes, the way he moved, the way the beast responded to him. Fear. Not Ethan's fear, but the beast's. Ethan took a slow step forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "You don't want to fight me," he said softly. "You're afraid." The beast growled lowly, but didn't move. "You're afraid of what I'll do," Ethan continued, a dark smile tugging at his lips. The crowd stared in disbelief. This human, this fragile creature, had brought a beast to its knees with nothing but words. Vakar whispered under his breath, "What are you, Ethan Carter?" Ethan's sharp eyes glanced toward the balcony, locking with Vakar's for a brief moment. He didn't answer out loud, but his smile said everything. "I'm human." And that was far more dangerous than anyone realized. The truth about humans. The arena was silent, too silent. Thousands of eyes were locked on Ethan Carter, a mere human who had just done the impossible. He stopped a auxiliary beast with nothing but his voice. No one moved, no one breathed, as if afraid any sound would shatter the fragile reality they were witnessing. From the royal balcony, the alien queen's silver eyes narrowed, her mind racing. She had ruled for centuries, seen countless warriors rise and fall, but never had she seen this, a human bending a creature's will without touching it. She gripped the armrest of her throne tightly, her sharp nails digging into the polished surface. "Impossible," she whispered under her breath. Beside her, Vakar remained silent, his gaze locked onto Ethan. Doubt flickered in his mind, but it wasn't doubt about his choice. It was doubt about what he truly knew of humans. In the arena, Ethan stood tall, his breathing slow and controlled, though his body screamed with exhaustion. Blood trickled from his shoulder, but pain no longer mattered. His eyes stayed locked on the beast, which now lowered its massive head in submission. The crowd erupted in chaos, some in disbelief, others in fear. "This is a trick," one shouted. "No human can do this." Another roared. "Kill him now," a voice echoed from the stands. But Ethan ignored them all. He knew what they wanted. Blood, violence, a show. He wasn't here to entertain them. The beast stepped back, its once violent eyes now filled with confusion and fear. Ethan understood that fear. He had seen it before. Not in monsters, in men. The other two beasts circled him, unsure whether to attack or flee. Ethan smirked slightly, his eyes sharp and unreadable. "Your move," he whispered. The crowd fell into a tense silence once more. In the Queen's chamber after the arena emptied, the tension remained heavy in the air. The Queen paced back and forth, her long robes flowing behind her like a dark river. She finally stopped and turned to Vakar, her piercing gaze making even the proud warrior shift uncomfortably. "You knew," she accused softly, but the weight of her words felt like a hammer striking metal. Vekar shook his head. No, I knew he was different, but I didn't expect this. The Queen's eyes narrowed. Do you understand what you've done? Vekar's voice remained calm but firm. I chose a human because they are survivors, because they adapt. But now, I see there's more. The Queen's voice grew colder. Much more. She walked to a large holographic screen that lit up with a map of the galaxy. In the corner, a small, unremarkable blue planet blinked softly. Earth. For centuries, we've watched them. The Queen began, her voice low and filled with an emotion that sounded dangerously close to fear. Humans, fragile, short-lived, driven by emotion. But they survive. No matter what the universe throws at them, they survive. Vekar frowned. Survival is not unique. Many species survive. The Queen's sharp eyes cut through him. No, Vekar, they don't just survive. They adapt, they evolve, and they learn faster than any species we've ever encountered. She leaned closer to the screen, her voice almost a whisper. We've tried to keep them contained, isolated, because deep down, we knew the truth. Vekar's voice was barely audible. What truth? The Queen turned to him, her expression grim. That if humans ever reached the stars, they wouldn't just survive. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle before finishing. They would conquer. Ethan sat alone in the dimly lit holding chamber beneath the arena, leaning back against the cold metal wall. His body ached, every muscle screaming, but his mind was focused, always focused. The door slid open with a soft hiss, and Vekar stepped inside, his eyes unreadable. Ethan smirked. Came to say, I told you so. Ethan quipped, wincing slightly as he shifted his injured shoulder. Vekar remained silent for a moment before finally speaking. You didn't win because of strength or speed. Ethan chuckled. No kidding. Those things would have ripped me apart. Vekar's voice grew quieter. You won because they were afraid. Ethan's smirk faded. Yeah, that tends to happen. Vekar stepped closer, his sharp eyes narrowing. Why? What are you? Ethan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Try me. Ethan's eyes grew distant, as if remembering something far away. Humans, we're not the strongest or the fastest. We don't have claws or fangs. But when we're pushed, when we're cornered, we become something else. Vekar tilted his head slightly. What? Ethan's gaze locked onto his. Relentless. In the palace's grand hall, the Queen stood alone, staring out at the stars through a massive window. Her mind was restless. She had feared humanity's potential for a long time. She had ordered Earth's isolation for this very reason. And now, one human stood within her walls, proving every fear correct. Humans do not fight with strength, she whispered to herself. They fight with something far worse. She closed her eyes, her voice barely audible, with nothing to lose. She knew the future had changed the moment Vekar chose Ethan Carter. And for the first time in centuries, the alien Queen felt something she had not felt in a long time. Doubt. And in that doubt was fear. The war that never was. The galaxy was vast, endless in its beauty and cruelty. Stars burned bright, and shadows stretched far. But within that vastness, there was always something lurking, waiting. And now that something had awakened. Far from the grand halls of the Galactic Dominion, in the cold void of space, a fleet was gathering. The warlords of Torvak, a species feared even by the strongest empires, ruthless, unstoppable, conquerors without mercy. Their ships, dark as the void itself, formed a massive blockade near the outer rim, preparing for an assault that could shake the galaxy to its core. And their target, the Galactic Dominion. But even the warlords, with all their power and brutality, whispered of one thing with unease. The human. In the Queen's war chamber, the tension was thick. Holographic screens displayed the incoming Torvak fleet, Red dots blinked like countless drops of blood, inching closer with every second. The queen stood at the head of the room, her expression unreadable, though her mind raced. Around her, generals and advisors murmured in worried tones. None dared to speak directly to her. Except one. Ethan Carter leaned casually against the wall, arms crossed, his expression calm, almost bored. His bruises from the arena had barely healed, but his sharp eyes missed nothing. Vakar stood beside him, his posture rigid, watching the screens intently. One of the generals growled, "We need to strike first. Hit them before they hit us." Another shook his head. "No, we must fortify our defenses. Let them come to us." The arguments grew louder, filling the room with noise. Ethan finally sighed, rubbing his temples. "You're all missing the point." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to him. The queen's voice was icy. "Enlighten us, human." Ethan smirked. "You're all acting like this is a normal war. It's not." Vakar frowned. "What do you mean?" Ethan pushed off the wall, stepping forward. "The Torvak don't fight like you. They don't care about territory or politics. They care about one thing, dominance. They want you to fear them. They want you to break before the fight even starts." The queen's eyes narrowed. "And you believe we are already broken?" Ethan chuckled softly. "Not yet. But you're close." The room bristled with tension. Vakar stepped forward. "Then what do you suggest?" Ethan's grin faded. His voice grew cold. "You don't fight them head-on. You can't win that way. You fight them the way humans fight." The queen's gaze sharpened. "And how do humans fight?" Ethan's eyes darkened. "We don't fight fair." The next day, the Dominion fleet prepared for war. Ships lined up in formation, weapons charged, defenses ready. But Ethan Carter wasn't on any of those ships. He was already gone. In a stolen Torvak shuttle, Ethan and Vakar flew through the vast emptiness, heading straight for the heart of the enemy fleet. Vakar, piloting the ship, glanced at Ethan. "This is madness." Ethan chuckled. "Yeah, well, humans are good at that." Vakar shook his head. "You still haven't explained why we're doing this." Ethan's grin was sharp. "Because you don't win wars by killing soldiers." Vakar's eyes narrowed. "Then how do you win?" Ethan leaned back. "You kill the will to fight." The Torvak flagship was a fortress, a massive behemoth floating in the void, surrounded by countless warships. Inside, the Warlord Council gathered, their monstrous forms casting long shadows. "They are weak," one growled. "We will crush them." Another hissed. "They have a human." Silence fell. The warlord leader, towering over the others, grinned. "A human. Good. I want to see what their fear tastes like." Suddenly, alarms blared. Red lights flashed across the ship. "An intruder alert." The warlord leader growled. "Who dares?" In the dark corridors of the flagship, Ethan and Vakar moved silently, taking out guards with precision. Ethan's mind worked like a machine. Every corner, every shadow, every possibility calculated in seconds. Vakar whispered, "This is insane." Ethan smirked. "Welcome to humanity." They reached the control room, and Ethan hacked into the system with ease. Screens flickered to life, showing the entire Torvak fleet. Ethan's fingers danced across the controls. "What are you doing?" Vakar asked. Ethan's grin was sharp. "Ending the war before it starts." With a final tap, Ethan activated the ship's communication system, broadcasting to every Torvak ship. His face appeared on every screen. "Hey there," he greeted casually. "I know you're all busy planning to destroy the Dominion and all that, but I thought we should have a chat." The warlords growled in rage, but Ethan continued, his voice calm and cold. "See, humans, we don't like bullies. And we're really good at making sure bullies regret their choices." He leaned closer to the screen. "If you come for us, we won't just fight back. We'll make sure you wish you never left your little corner of the galaxy." The warlord leader snarled. "You think you can threaten us, human?" Ethan's smile was chilling. "Oh, it's not a threat. It's a promise." With that, he triggered the device he had planted, a signal disrupting the entire fleet's communications and navigation systems. Ships flickered, losing control momentarily. Chaos erupted. Ethan turned to Vakar. "Time to go." They raced back to their shuttle as the fleet scrambled, confusion spreading like wildfire. As they escaped into the void, Vakar glanced at Ethan. "You didn't destroy them." Ethan's expression was hard. "I didn't need to." Vakar frowned. "Why?" Ethan's voice was quiet but firm. "Because now they're afraid." And that, Ethan knew, was far more powerful than any weapon. The human tactic. The void of space was silent, but silence never meant peace. Not here. Not now. The Torvak fleet, once a perfect machine of destruction, floated in chaos. Systems flickered. Communications were scrambled. Orders were lost. The warlords, known for their brutal efficiency, now found themselves clawing through disorder, trying to regain control. In the heart of the Dominion, the Queen stood before her council, the holographic screen before them showing the Torvak fleet in disarray. But despite the sight, there was no relief in her eyes, only curiosity. And something much darker. "How?" she whispered, though no one dared to answer. Vakar, standing beside her, spoke softly. "Ethan Carter." The Queen's silver eyes flicked toward him. "A single human caused this." Vakar nodded, but his expression was troubled. "This isn't luck. It's not strength or technology. It's him. Humans, they don't break their enemies. They break their enemies' minds." The Queen's gaze hardened. "Then let us hope we never become their enemy." Ethan Carter sat on the edge of the stolen shuttle's control panel, his boots resting on the seat in front of him. He hummed softly, tapping his fingers on his knee as Vakar piloted the ship back to Dominion space. "You seem pleased," Vakar muttered without looking at him. Ethan chuckled. "Well, I did just make an entire war fleet question their life choices. So yeah, I'm feeling pretty good." Vakar shook his head. "You didn't even fire a shot." Ethan grinned. "That's the point." Vakar's sharp eyes flicked to Ethan. "Explain." Ethan leaned back, folding his arms behind his head. "Wars aren't just won with weapons, scales for brains. They're won with fear, confusion, doubt." Vakar frowned. "That is not how warriors fight." Ethan's smile faded. His voice grew quiet, almost bitter. "No, it's how survivors fight." Vakar remained silent, sensing the weight behind Ethan's words. After a moment, Ethan sighed, the humor draining from his face. "You know why humans survive? Why we always manage to crawl out of the dirt, no matter how many times we're knocked down?" Vakar waited, knowing the answer was coming. "Because we don't fight to win," Ethan whispered. "We fight to make sure you lose." In the Torvak flagship, the warlords gathered, their fury palpable. The leader slammed a massive fist onto the control panel, shattering it. "A human. A single human made fools of us." One of the younger warlords growled, "We should strike now. Crush them before they regroup." The leader's sharp gaze cut through the room. "No." The others fell silent. "They expect us to attack now," the leader hissed. "They think we will act in anger." A dark grin spread across his face. "We will wait. We will watch. And when the human least expects it, we will strike." But even as he spoke, a shadow of doubt lingered in his mind. A shadow that wore a human's grin. Back in the Dominion war chamber, the Queen paced slowly. The council awaited her orders, but none dared to interrupt her thoughts. She was calculating, as she always did. But this time, something felt different. Ethan and Vakar entered, and the room grew even quieter. The Queen's gaze landed on Ethan. "You succeeded." Ethan grinned. "You're welcome." Her expression remained cold. Do not mistake my silence for gratitude, human. Ethan chuckled softly. Fair enough. Vakar stepped forward. What now? The Queen turned to the holographic display of the galaxy, her voice calm but sharp. We prepare. The Torvak will not stay in the shadows for long. When they strike, we will be ready. Ethan's smirk faded. You don't get it, do you? The Queen's eyes narrowed. Enlighten me. Ethan stepped closer, his voice low and serious. They're not going to come at you like before. Not after this. They're going to come for me. The room tensed. Vakar's eyes widened. You? Ethan nodded. I humiliated them. And creatures like them, they don't forget that. The Queen's voice was cold. Then perhaps we should give you to them. Ethan chuckled darkly. Yeah, good luck with that. Vakar stepped forward. We can't just hand him over. The Queen's gaze remained unreadable. Then what do you suggest? Ethan's smile returned, but it was sharp, dangerous. We don't wait for them to come. We go to them. The room fell into stunned silence. Vakar frowned. You want to attack the Torvak first. Ethan shook his head. Not attack. Disrupt. Confuse. Make them so paranoid they start fighting each other. The Queen's expression darkened. You want to break them from within. Ethan nodded. Exactly. Vakar hesitated. That is risky. Ethan's grin was almost predatory. Risky is what humans do best. The Queen finally nodded slowly. Very well. Prepare your plan, human. But know this, if you fail, there will be no place in this galaxy for you to hide. Ethan's eyes sparkled with mischief. Good thing I'm not planning to fail. As Ethan and Vakar left the chamber, Vakar asked softly, Are you sure about this? Ethan's smile was faint, almost sad. No, but that's never stopped me before. Vakar watched him closely. You act like you have nothing to lose. Ethan's voice was barely a whisper. I don't. In the silence of the corridor, Vakar finally understood the most dangerous truth about Ethan Carter. Humans didn't need strength to win. They needed nothing to lose. The price of victory. The stars shimmered silently over the battlefield. Debris from destroyed ships drifted through the void, remnants of the chaos that had unfolded. Fires flickered in the darkness, brief echoes of battles that had raged just hours before. The Torvak fleet was broken, not by weapons, not by armies, but by fear. Ethan Carter stood on the deck of a Dominion warship, watching the aftermath through the wide observation window. His reflection stared back at him, a tired man with sharp eyes, a scar across his brow, and the weight of a war on his shoulders. Behind him, Vakar approached, his armor still scratched from the battle. It's over, Vakar said softly. Ethan didn't move. Is it? Vakar frowned. The Torvak are retreating. Their leaders are dead. We won. Ethan's voice was barely a whisper. We didn't win. We survived. There's a difference. Vakar tilted his head. You don't seem pleased. Ethan chuckled softly, but there was no humor in it. Victory's funny like that. It always costs more than you think. Hours earlier, the final assault had begun. Ethan's plan was reckless, so reckless that even the Queen had hesitated to approve it. But humans were nothing if not reckless. Ethan and Vakar had infiltrated the Torvak command ship, using stealth, deception, and sheer luck to reach the Warlord Council. But it wasn't weapons that Ethan had brought with him. It was knowledge. He had uncovered the deepest secrets of the Torvak. Alliances broken, betrayals hidden, fears unspoken. And he used them like knives. One by one, he whispered these secrets into the ears of the warlords, planting seeds of doubt, twisting them against each other. Suspicion turned to rage. Rage turned to violence. The warlords tore themselves apart from within. And while they fought, the Dominion fleet struck, shattering their ranks with precision. The battle ended before it truly began. Now, back on the Dominion warship, the Queen entered the observation deck, her presence commanding as always. You delivered what you promised, she said quietly, standing beside Ethan. Ethan didn't look at her. And now you're wondering if that was a good thing. Her silver eyes narrowed. Should I be worried, human? Ethan finally turned to face her. Maybe. Vakar stepped forward. He did what no one else could. He saved the Dominion. The Queen's gaze didn't waver, and in doing so, he showed us what humanity is capable of. Ethan's lips curled into a faint, bitter smile. Now you're afraid of me too. The Queen's silence was answer enough. Ethan sighed. You should be. Vakar frowned. Ethan. Ethan raised a hand, cutting him off. No, Vakar. She's right to be afraid. His voice grew colder. You've seen what I can do with just words. Imagine what humans could do if they really wanted to. The Queen's voice was quiet but firm. And do they? Ethan's eyes softened, and for a moment, he looked tired. No, not yet. She studied him for a long moment. Then let us hope it stays that way. Without another word, she turned and left. Later, as Ethan prepared to leave the warship, Vakar followed him to the docking bay. You're leaving, Vakar stated, though it wasn't a question. Ethan nodded. Yeah, my job's done. Vakar frowned. Where will you go? Ethan shrugged. Somewhere quiet. Vakar stepped closer. You don't have to leave. You could stay. Join the Dominion. Ethan chuckled softly. No offense, but I don't really do well with empires. Vakar's eyes darkened. You're running. Ethan's smirk faded. Maybe. Vakar's voice grew quieter. Why? Ethan's gaze met his. Because as long as I'm here, they'll never stop being afraid. And fear, it's dangerous. Vakar's jaw tightened. Then let them fear you. Ethan shook his head. It's not me I'm worried about. Vakar exhaled slowly, understanding now. Humanity. Ethan nodded. Yeah. If they're afraid of me, what happens when the rest of humanity shows up? Vakar remained silent. Ethan placed a hand on Vakar's shoulder. You made the right choice, but choices have consequences. Vakar's voice was barely a whisper. What will yours be? Ethan smiled faintly. I guess I'll find out. As the shuttle door closed behind him, Vakar watched it disappear into the void, a single thought echoing in his mind. Humans don't fight to win. They fight to survive. And sometimes, survival was the most terrifying victory of all.